Every generation before central heating lived by one quiet rule at night: warmth was prepared, not chased. Houses were cold by modern standards, yet people slept through winters that would overwhelm most homes today if the power went out. This was not accidental. It was the result of deliberate overnight systems refined through experience, scarcity, and hard winters. These methods were not comforting rituals or folklore. They were rules that kept people alive, reduced illness, and preserved energy in an era when fuel was expensive and labor was constant. This guide focuses on that overnight rule in its pure form, how warmth was built into the body, the bed, and the room before sleep began, and how that system can still be applied today with precision and effectiveness. The body was warmed before the bed ever was. The first rule was simple and absolute: no one went to bed cold. Heat was generated in the body before entering the sleeping space because warming a bed with a cold body wastes energy and leads to heat loss instead of heat retention. Evening routines always included physical movement, hot food, and warm liquids timed carefully before rest. Light labor, such as carrying water, splitting kindling, or sweeping floors, was common just before nightfall. This activity elevated body temperature without exhausting the muscles, creating internal warmth that lasted into sleep. Hot meals were eaten close to bedtime, not hours earlier. Thick soups, stews, porridges, and bread-based meals dominated winter evenings because digestion itself produces heat. Warm milk, broth, or weak tea followed shortly after. The goal was not comfort, but thermal momentum. Once warm, the body was sealed into that heat. This principle applies directly today. Anyone preparing for cold nights without reliable heat should avoid lying down cold. Just 10 minutes of controlled movement, a warm drink, and layered clothing before sleep, well, that drastically reduces heat loss through the night. Bedding was layered for heat capture, not to feel luxurious. Straw mattresses, wool blankets, feather quilts, and thick linen sheets were chosen because they held warm air close to the body. The layers were arranged deliberately. Heavier materials went on top to prevent rising heat from escaping, while breathable layers remained closest to the skin to manage moisture. Moisture was the enemy of warmth. Cotton was used sparingly in winter because it holds dampness. Wool dominated because it insulates even when slightly wet and regulates temperature naturally. Blankets were tucked tightly at the sides and foot of the bed, creating a sealed pocket of warmth. Beds were not left loose or airy. Modern sleepers can apply this by prioritizing wool or wool blends, minimizing synthetic fabrics that trap moisture, and sealing the bed space instead of letting heat escape around the edges. Back in the day, folks would pre-warm the bed using stored heat, not open flames. Open flames near sleeping areas were avoided whenever possible just to keep things safe. Instead, heat was captured and transferred in a much safer way. Heated stones, bricks, or even metal objects were placed near the foot of the bed or wrapped in cloth and tucked under the covers before sleep. Later on, hot water bottles came into play and replaced those stones for pretty much the same reason. These objects would release heat slowly throughout the night, helping to stabilize the sleeping environment. The timing of all this really mattered. These heat sources were placed in the bed shortly before bedtime, so their peak warmth lined up with you falling asleep. Once the bed was warm enough, they were removed or shifted, just to keep from overheating or causing any fire risk. This method is still effective today, honestly. A hot water bottle or a heated brick wrapped up securely can raise the bed temperature quite a bit without having to heat the whole room. That way, you conserve energy and cut down on exposure to cold air at night. Back in the day, night clothing followed some pretty strict rules. Sleeping naked in winter, well, that was rare as hen's teeth. Nightwear was specific, layered, and really only reserved for sleeping. Folks would wear linen or wool underlayers to soak up moisture, while heavier outer night garments helped keep the heat in. Socks were often worn to stop heat from escaping through the feet since, those are major thermal exit points. And nightcaps were common too, because a whole lot of body heat escapes right through your head. Clothing worn during the day was never, ever worn to bed. Day garments carried moisture and dirt, which, honestly, just made you lose heat even faster. Clean, dry sleepwear was absolutely essential if you wanted to stay warm through the night. Nowadays, this all means changing into dry thermal layers before bed and making sure to protect your extremities. Cold feet or an uncovered head can, well, undo all your other efforts to stay warm, no matter how many blankets you pile on. Bedrooms were smaller for a reason. Large rooms were just impossible to keep warm overnight. Doors were closed tightly, drafts blocked with cloth or rolled rugs, and windows were covered with thick curtains or shutters after sunset. Fireplaces were damped down carefully so embers released heat slowly rather than burning out quickly. Beds were positioned away from exterior walls and windows to cut down on exposure to cold surfaces. In a whole lot of homes, multiple people slept in the same room or even the same bed, not for sentimentality, but really just for shared body heat. The overnight warmth rule extended right on into the morning. Folks did not just jump out of bed into that cold air. Clothing was kept within arm's reach, often warmed near the hearth or tucked under bed covers. Rising was deliberate and quick, sealing warmth into layers before stepping out into the chill. This all prevented rapid heat loss and helped reduce the shock that weakens the immune system. Cold shock, well, it was understood long before anybody ever defined it scientifically. So applying this today means, well, getting your morning clothes ready the night before and steering clear of unnecessary exposure, especially when heating is limited. This wasn't just tradition for tradition's sake. It actually reduced fuel use, helped prevent illness, and preserved strength through those long winters. Families that ignored these practices, well, they paid for it in sickness and exhaustion, but those who stuck to them, they endured. These systems worked because they treated warmth as something stored, protected, and managed, not something endlessly produced. Anyone facing winter power outages, rising energy costs, or off-grid living can apply this rule immediately. Warm the body before bed, seal the sleeping space, use stored heat safely, protect extremities, manage the room as a container, not an open space. These are not comfort tips. They are survival systems refined by necessity. Modern technology has not improved these principles. It has only made people forget them. The overnight warmth rule was not written down because it did not need to be. It was enforced by cold nights and hard consequences. Understanding it offers more than comfort. It reconnects us with a mindset that valued efficiency, discipline, and resilience. If you found this breakdown useful and want more deep practical history drawn from lived experience rather than myth, subscribe to Warfield Prepper Chronicles. Share this with anyone serious about preparedness, historical living, or understanding how people truly survive before modern convenience.